your country, to your homeland. CMP, of course, the great Sweat, and yo, I just want to say thank you, man. It's really fantastic to be here and to be able to share, and then most importantly to meet, you know, a new family. You know, one thing I got to give props. I don't know if this is being filmed, but if it is, I want to make sure I say, you know, I got here and I talked to many, listened to many of you speak, and many of you mentioned Wayne, okay? And almost every person I talked to told me a story about how they stayed at Wayne's house, Wayne COD, or had an interaction with him. So I got to say thank you to him for being a good ambassador, so to speak, and be welcoming and create the continuity and the bridge between continents and people, because that's what hip-hop culture is. You should be able to travel anywhere in the world, right? And give the secret handshake. Where you at, CMP, man? You know, this is the secret handshake, right? And let them know you're down with hip-hop and you should get a pillow and a place to stay, you know? For real, that's what this family is about. You should be able to go anywhere. Hip-hop is the commonality between peoples. I said a few years ago somewhere on social media that I felt hip-hop would save the world, would be the saving grace of humanity, because we have so many different points of divisiveness, of division, so many different things that make us not understand each other, not like each other, not tolerate each other. But in hip-hop, we all find a common point of reference, and we all find a common bond and experience. Okay, irregardless of all of the things that the powers that be use to keep us separate. So in this case, hip-hop is very important, but it's also very dangerous to establishment, because it does just that. Establishment likes when we are at odds with each other, when we are warring, when we are fighting, when we are not tolerant. But hip-hop knocks those walls down, and it makes us family no matter where you are. One thing about hip-hop is about experience. I was telling CMP before I ever met him, thanks to the miracle that is social media, I had been seeing his work, and I was like, wow, who is this guy? I'm gonna tell you, I thought this was some black dude from the Bronx, and I was like, who is this dude? Because his work, you could tell that it was a person who had been there and was not just drawing from some photos or something that he saw on the internet. You could tell from the spirit of the work that the person had a story to tell. And I came to find out that was true. I swear to you, I didn't know that was him. You know, I did not know that was him. You know? And then, you know, one of my mentors is my big brother is Chain 3. Anybody know who Chain 3 is? Anybody ever heard of Chain 3? Well, I hope at the end of this, more people can raise their hand and know a little bit more about him. But he told me, he said, yeah, I was over in Denmark with this dude Sweat, you know, and he said, yo, these dudes are phenomenal, it's family, you're gonna have a great time. He said, yo, this dude Sweat is a beast. And that was the exact term that he used, and yo, that was a fucking understatement. Yeah, that was an understatement. The shit is in his blood. I recount the other day, we were sitting at the table, and I pulled out my little photo album with maybe 80 pieces in it, maybe, I don't know. And they were very nice, because they were like, ooh and ah, and ooh and ah. And then Sweat took me to his studio and embarrassed the shit out of me and pulled out like 20 fucking photo albums full of pieces where he's been just destroying shit. And that's very humbling, and it's very pleasing to see.
Thanks to you. And back to you, please.
Yeah, man. So it's great to see that something that we as kids, we did, I don't know, how many years is that shit ago? 30, 35 years? How long is it now? Is that right? 35? Yeah, something like that. Long time ago, right? When I had hair. But it's great to see that the youth and us old guys, old school guys, we're still carrying on. Many of you find, man, listen, I'm humbled to be here amongst some of these dudes, man, that I've only heard stories about from across Europe. It's very, very, very humbling. You know, there's something that I call the Noah effect, which is, you know, in the Bible. And I'm not no Bible thumper, right? But in the Bible, as a story, Noah recounts his interaction with the flood, and in the account it tells that the whole world flooded. Well, I don't know how Noah would know that, because there was no cell phones to call anyone anywhere else to find out that the whole world had flooded. So in reality, what happened was probably just his little valley where he was at flooded, and he just assumed it was the whole world. Okay? And so that's kind of what you have if you don't get out and travel and go around the world and see other things and other people. Yo, you're living in your one little valley, and you'll never get the full experience. So to that end, again, I say thank you, man, for pulling me out of my little valley to come and see real shit, man. And you know, this is it. This is not a game. You know, I can see that this is in your hearts, and it's in your minds and in your spirit, and that this is real right and shit. And after this, I hope we go hit some trains. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, seriously. So thank you for the hospitality and so on. So I was born in oh man, it's hard to even say. I was born in 1964. I was born in 1964 in Lincoln, in the old Lincoln Hospital in the Bronx. And so coming off of this is what, civil rights movement time. Martin Luther King assassinated, Malcolm X assassinated, Vietnam, civil unrest. Much of that I spent in my mother's stomach, so it wasn't like I was out there with a sign. I was a baby, you know. But this is the place where my mother is coming from. This is the era that shaped my mother. Hence, of course, my mother wound up shaping me. So, although I wasn't there in the streets physically, I was what I was taught in the home, and those things was born out of my mother's experience. So, what else was going on? Vietnam was going on. I think Vietnam ended in 72, right? 72, 73. I think 73 is, anybody ever seen the famous photos or footage where they're pushing the last helicopters into the ocean?
Yep.
You seen that?
Yes.
Very similar to them pushing the trains in the ocean, right? But 72 is the same time when graffiti was said to be officially born on trains. So you got to put all these things into context and into perspective. Culture. Culture is a word that we often use lightly. But let me tell you, from a black person's, and oh, by the way, my father is half white, half Irish, and black. He's from Barbados. But as a black person, as a brown person in America, in regards to culture, I'm going to tell you why hip-hop was so important as it evolved. It's important because black people are the only people to be totally robbed of their culture. And I'm talking so-called African Americans. Okay? I don't know any African American dances. I don't speak no African dialects. I don't know how to cook any African dishes. We black people in America are born out of the abolitionist and Jim Crow and desegregation movement. And of course, as many of you know, during slavery, all of those points of our culture were taken away. You were not allowed to speak any of the African dialects, you know, unless under the threat of death, right? You were not allowed to worship any of your gods, and those religions and practices were replaced with Christianity. taken away. Dances were forbidden, rituals were forbidden, and hence those things were lost. And so our culture was robbed and we were devoid. I remember I used to be jealous of my Puerto Rican brothers, right? Because although they were new implants in the early or mid 60s, they were new implants into America, they still retained their culture. They had their salsa y merengue, they had their peas and rice, they had their santeria, right? And they had their spoken and oral traditions. And so I was jealous, because I'm like, yo, where's my shit at? And so that's why hip hop became very important, because it became our culture. It became our culture that we ultimately shared again with the entire world. But it became our culture. Now I don't want to go all into the hip hop and Bambaataa thing and Bambaataa packaging and all of that. Because one thing about Bambaataa, as many of you have heard some of the controversy, is that true? Everyone knows what I'm talking about? With allegations of pedophilia and molestation. I don't know, I wasn't there. If it happened, it was disgusting. And I'm not talking about homosexuality. If you're gay, that's your business. I don't care. I'm talking about if you're using a position of authority to take advantage of younger people in a susceptible position. That's ugly. Okay? But even before and even without, if Bambaataa would have never presented a doctrine, so to speak, packaging hip hop into 4 core with one additional element, that being education and knowledge, that was our culture. It was the dance, it was the emceeing, which was the spoken word or oral tradition. It was the DJ, right, Typhoon? The DJ replaced what? What did the DJ replace? Anybody know? The DJ replaced the drums, right? The DJ replaced the percussionist in Afrocentric culture. Okay?
Agree.
Huh?
Agree.
Please, yeah. Yeah, that's indeed. So these things became replacements for us. They became a new life. And the first element of hip hop is said to be writing. Okay, it is the first element. And right now there's a lot of controversy. You know, many places I go and people say, yo, Grandmaster Flash said writing ain't part of hip hop. Well, he's in his valley. Okay, he's talking from his valley. You know, people they say strange shit when they get a microphone in front of them. So you got to watch me, man. If I say some bullshit, call me on it. But when people get in front of a crowd and they get to talking and they say strange shit, I'm telling you. So for Grandmaster Flash to come out and say writing is not part of hip hop, that's bullshit. How dare you? And then the irony is you come out with a show called The Get Down that depicts, you know, writing, breaking, and all of that shit in the show. So which one is it? Make your mind up. Okay? Writing culture is part of hip hop. It is the first element of hip hop. It is the first element that was born. Okay? Now, CMP, hey man, this guy dances better than me.
No way.
Yeah, no, I'm telling you, no shit. You want to show him? Nah. He said no. No doubt. But, you know, in those elements, you wind up picking 1 or 2, and if you're lucky, you're a triple. Some people are triple and quadruple threats. For example, one of my partners, Dez. Anybody know DJ K Slay? Okay, y'all know that's Dez, my partner, right? And so this guy could dance, he can DJ, and he can paint. So he's a triple threat, right? Now, I've never seen him MC, so I ain't going to say he can't. But I know for a fact he's proficient in those other three things. So he was lucky. Me, I can only do one. When you were growing up in school in New York, at that time in the 70s, all of the hallways, all of the streets, everything was bombed. There wasn't a clear spot to be found. Any flat surface, you will find pieces on it. Okay? In your school, the hallways would be bombed, the steps would be bombed, your desk would be bombed. Sometimes you would battle a person on your desk. Right? Meaning, in first period, science, I would do a piece, and then I would get up and leave, and the next period, Sweat would come in and see the shit I drew, and he would draw one right under it and battle me right on the desk. And then I would come back the next day and see the Sweat piece under the Skeme. I'd be like, oh! But see, sometimes you wouldn't even know who it was who drew it. You would just see the piece. And such was anonymity, secrecy, which is one of the first tenets of writing. Okay, when we started out writing. So you see it, you wonder who did it, you wonder how it was done, and if you're so inclined, you want to do it. So the first time I saw it, let me tell you how it happened, is someone passed a little paper around, right? And it had the 6 lines on it. Y'all, anybody know what I'm talking about? You know the 6 lines, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 lines, you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Who said that?
I said yes.
Tell what I'm talking about. Huh? Okay, all right. No, but seriously, so the 3 lines, you got 1, 2, 3, and then another 3 lines under the bottom. Okay, well, that's one of the first things you receive, and it's a puzzle. What, you got a piece of paper? Give me some paper, and I'll show you the puzzle. This will make it a little more simple. Okay, you see that? Now y'all know what I'm talking about? Anybody know what I'm talking about now? Anybody know what I'm talking about? You know?
Perhaps it's the little S.
Say words, son. That's the answer. So you receive this puzzle, and you're like, yo, what can I do? What the hell am I supposed to do with this? And it's a test. Exactly. You start to connect those lines, right? 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 And that's the first letter you receive. Okay, that's the first thing that you're taught. At least for me, that's what it was. Right? And so, once I received that puzzle, and I was taught how to do it, I was hooked. And then, of course, the next natural thing is trying to figure out how to do all the rest of the alphabet, because they don't show you that shit, they just show you the S. Right? But once you learn that and you go on the quest and you get hooked, that's the spirit or foundation of letter development, is trying to figure out the rest of that, what was termed diamond point letters. Okay? And so there's many ways to impress the girls. I was all right at basketball. I was all right. I was all right at dancing. I could 2-step back and forth without stepping on a girl's feet. Right? But the thing I was really good at was drawing. Okay? That's what I was good at, was drawing. And so I became hooked. Okay? So let me tell you, all the way up until 1979, before I went to high school, I went to private school. My mother did her best. She went back to school to further educate herself, to try to make a better life for us. And as part of that, she sent me to private school for, I guess what you would call, I don't know, middle school. What do y'all call it? Middle school? And then on up through junior high school. And then these are private classes with maybe 15 people in the class. And lo and behold, man, I graduated junior high school and went to the 9th grade high school, public school, with 45 people in the class. Okay? And if you were absent that day, they didn't even notice. And I don't even think they cared, to be honest with you. Okay? And so I had a friend who's a good friend to this day. And so he was absent for about a week. And when he came back, I said, yo, you all right? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, yo, I haven't seen you in a week. He started laughing. He said, I was in the auditorium. It's like, you was in the auditorium. He said, yeah, I was cutting. You know what cutting is, right? Cutting? Anybody know? That's when you don't go to class. That's when you cut school. We call it cutting. But because I had gone to private school with a small classroom, there was you couldn't cut. If you were absent, they would immediately call, hey, he's not sitting in his seat. But when you go to high school, there's so many people, they're not keeping track and they don't give a shit. And you can actually basically not go to class and nobody really says anything. So I asked him, he said, yeah, I was cutting. I was like, cutting? Okay. All right. He said, I said, yo, they're not going to say nothing? He said, no. He said, next period, meet me in the lunchroom. And this was 2 months into high school. I met him in the lunchroom, and we cut, and I never went back to school. I'm telling you the truth. I never went back to school. I did like maybe 2 months, 3 months in the 9th grade. And I'm not telling you kids to do that. I'm just telling you the dumb shit I did. All right? And I never went back to school. And this is on the tailspin of when I was about... I was 13. Yeah, I lied about my age because I wanted to pledge to a fraternity. One of my best friends, who's passed on now, was pledging to a fraternity called the Order of the Feather. It was an Afro-Indian fraternity. And I mean like a regular fraternity, like a college fraternity with ass whoopings and all of that. But anyway, I wanted to pledge. So I pledged to this fraternity on the 1978 line. And so after I crossed over in 78, the next year was 79, and one of the guys who was getting ready to go through, was at my house. And he saw me drawing. And I had no idea that he wrote, and he saw me drawing, and he looked over my shoulder. He said, what are you drawing? I said, I'm tagging. And he said, you're tagging? He said, what does it say? And so many of you may have heard me say I wrote Cheerios. And I said, I'm writing Cheerios. And he's like, Cheerios? He said, that shit is whack. And I asked him, I said, what do you know about it? He said, yo, I write. And I was like, get out of here, because I had been knowing him, but we never discussed writing. So to find out that he wrote was amazing. And he started naming to me all of these people. Yo, I know Case 2, I know T and K, and he was naming all of these people. And I was like, yeah, right. You don't know these people, right? And he said, yeah, and I know Phase 2. But at the time, I didn't even know who Phase 2 was. I was such a novice writer, beginning writer, that
King.
Who?
Crime in the City.
Yeah, no doubt. That comes a little bit later.
You knew him?
That comes a little later. But I knew about writing, but I didn't grow up with writers. So my knowledge of writing was very limited. And he says one day to me, he said, yo, come here, I'm going to take you to somebody's house. And he takes me to a house and he knocks on the door, and who comes out the door? Phase 2 comes out the door. And for this guy to take me to Phase 2's house was, man, the forethought, you know? The forethought. To say, listen, I think I can tell that you love this. I'm going to take you to meet somebody important in the culture. And I was a super toy. I was horrible. But Phase 2 came out of his door. He wasn't arrogant. He wasn't dismissive. He wasn't like, yo, who's this guy? Why you bring him to my house? Put out his hand. We dapped up. Whatever the dap of the day was, I don't remember what it was at that time. We dapped up. He talked to me for a few minutes. He said, yo, man, nice to meet you. I'll see you around. And I forgot all about phase 2. And I went back, back to my craft, and I started practicing and writing. And then one day, my friend who wrote Mr. Mean, not Mean 3, but Mr. Mean, he said, yo, you want to go to a yard? You want to go to a layup? He said, you ready for that? I said, yeah, I'm ready. All right. He said, all right, get ready. All right. So we're waiting for the weekend. So I'm practicing, and he comes back over. He said, yo, man, you always scheming on, getting money, because back then I used to do shoplifting. You know what shoplifting is, right? That's when you steal shit that don't belong to you. And he said, you always scheming on ways to get money. You always hustling. And I said, you know what? Scheme. And I wrote Skeme, S-C-H-E-M-E. He said, yeah, I like it, but it's too long. It's too many letters. He said, the majority of good names is 5 letters and below. He said, there's some successful dudes with 6 letters, but listen, remember, for every letter, that's the time you're in the yard. You want to get in, you want to get out. He said, I like the name, but it's too long. So that's when I took the C-H that formed the K sound, and I replaced the C-H with a K, and hence my name was born, S-K-E-M-E. And he said, okay, I like that. He said, get ready on the weekend, we're going. So he went, he told me you got to get a pilot marker, and he told me a mini at the time. So I found a store, I racked the pilot marker, and back in those days, we didn't pay for any supplies. We stole everything, okay? Because if I would have went to my mother and said, Ma, I need $20 for a can of Flowmaster ink, she would have been like, yeah, right. So you had to steal those things at that time, and I wasn't working at that time. And sat down with the marker. He showed me how to take the pen and pin the top of the felt and make it soft. And we sat there for hours just sticking the tip of the marker with a pin, flaring out the top. And then he showed me how to fill it with ink and all those things. And we got ready, and the weekend came around, and my heart was beating. And we walked up the hill from 145th Street and Lenox Avenue up to 145th Street and Broadway, which was the northern end of the one tunnel, which ran between 137th Street and Broadway and 145th Street and Broadway. He said, yo, we're going to go to the one tunnel. We went up, and when we walked in, the trains were just laid up right there in the middle. You didn't have to go in the tunnel. And he walked to the edge, and he just jumped down on the tracks and climbed up in the tracks, and he looked back at me and said, yo, you coming or what? And I was like, oh, shit, really? Just like that? And he said, yeah, come on. And I just jumped down. I climbed up in the train, and we pulled out the markers that we had bought, and he wrote his name first, Mr. Mean. And the drips from the ink just cascaded down, and I was mesmerized. He said, all right, you right. And I pulled out my marker, and I wrote my name, no drips and shit, okay? And I wrote my name, and he was like, yo, shake the marker down. So, you got to shake the marker down to bring the ink down to the tip and flood it. And I did that, and I wrote again, and this time some drips came, And man, let me tell you, I was hooked. I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And after that, I did nothing else but write. I did absolutely nothing else, okay? So from that time on, from mid-1979 to September 1982, 5 days a week, 6 days a week, 7 days a week, 8 days a week.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, man, that's right. That's right. I went bombing. I went through so many partners, okay? I went through many partners because they were like, yo, we just went last night. So I was like, yo, you're not going? I'm getting another partner. Okay? I'm getting another partner because of the name of the game was Getting Up. Right? And the way that term Getting Up came about was in the early days of writing, which was before trains was on walls, one of the things to do was to write in dangerous high spots or unattainable locations. And people would walk by and they would say, how'd he get his name up there? And that's where the term Getting Up comes from. So the name of the game was Getting Up. And so that was my mission for the next 3 years. And I bombed like nobody's business. I started out on the insides. I came the D's, the CC's, the A's, and these are clean cars at the time. The actual line that ran by my house was the 3s, but they were bombed on the inside. So if you ever hear anybody say in the 80s they kinged the 3s or the 1s on the insides, they're lying, because the shit was already smashed. You just find little spots to get in where you fit in. So I went to other lines to find clean cars, and I just literally destroyed them. You're talking about millions of dollars in damage.
King.
Okay? So you gotta understand what the fight is about, right? You're talking millions of dollars in damage. Just me, one person. So imagine hundreds of writers doing the same shit. It's a lot of damage, man. Okay? It's a lot of destruction of private city property. Okay? So I'm writing, I'm bombing. And so one day I go to and at this point I'm in no cruise. So one day I go to the 3 yard. Let me tell you about destiny. Remember I told you I moved from the Bronx, right? 777, what a number, right? 777 Fox Street is where we lived until I was about 3, and we moved to a place called Esplanade Gardens in Harlem. And Esplanade Gardens was literally built on top of an old train yard. Okay? I've seen the photos. It was a large freight train yard, like 20 times the size of any train yard now. This is a large industrial wartime train yard. Okay? And if you can imagine, as the front of my building, you see the bongos right here? When you come out of my building, that's the train yard right there. You're talking 40 steps. Yo, I'm not exaggerating. When you walk out of my front door, the train yard is right there. That's a destiny, right? How can you not become a writer and the train yard is right out your front door? You're a sucker, right? It's right there. And so the 3 yard became my home, because see, at first I was going other places, and then I said, yo, hell, I got one right here. Let me go check this one out. And I wandered in there one day, and there was a bunch of guys writing. Pour One, Push, Blazer, who later became one of my partners, Seal. And I came in, they said, yo, what you write? And I said, I write Skeme. And Pour, being who he was, he said, I never heard of that shit. Right? But you got to remember, at that time I was hitting the CC's and the D's and other lines. I said, well, yeah, I write on these other lines. He said, those lines ain't shit. Okay? This is the line right here. This is the Broadway line. Because the 3s switched over to the 1s, which came outside. Okay? You could not get photos of the 3s because they didn't come outside. You had to pray and hope that the 3s switched over to a 1 train and came outside and ran up. You know the photo with me and Dez is standing on the platform? That's where everybody took pictures of the Broadway line. That's 125th Street and Broadway. So I came and he said, yo, can you piece? And I said, yeah, but I was lying. Yeah, I was lying. I never did a piece before. He said, can you piece? I said, yeah. He said, all right, yo, meet us here next week with some paint. You're going to do a piece with my man Blazer. We're going to see. And so I went out, I racked the paint from Woolworth's, a cheap store, cheap paint. It was bullshit paint. And I racked the paint. I met him there the next week. I came in the yard, and they were there. And he said, yo, you ready to do this piece? And I said, yeah. And I did, I don't know if anyone's ever seen it. It's a Skeme and Blazer, and it has a guy on one end shooting a laser gun at my name. And then there's a Charlie Brown in the middle and another character on the other end. And it was hurt, man. That thing was leaned over like that, right? But they liked it. And he said, yo.
That shit 20 years ago.
Yeah, 30 something, bro. And he said, man, that piece is fire. He said, yo, write BGA, which is Bad Graffiti Artists. He said, you down in BGA now. BGA was the first crew that I was put in. And so, yo, it just continued on. Blazer was my first partner, but Blazer was also, he used to play ball a lot, so he was with traveling teams, and so his time was limited. And so I had to get another partner, man, because I'm going tonight, and I'm going tomorrow night, and I'm going the next night, and the next night, and the next night, and the next night, and I'm getting up. All right? And so that's how it was born. So to that point, listen, you've seen the film, you know a little bit of the background, and so yo, let's just talk like family, man. What are your questions?
Excuse me?
Yes.
In our world, you're of course a Skeme legend, but you have a partner. For us, you're just Skeme. That's my opinion.
Yes, man. That's better. I appreciate that.
Comment.
Thank you for the comment, man. I appreciate that. Come on, look, man. I flew all the way over here. Don't tell me you ain't got no questions in the blue.
Yeah, can you tell a little about Writer's Bench?
Oh, man, the Writer's Bench. The Writer's Bench is on 149th Street in the Grand Concourse. Before that, it was known as Mott Avenue. Okay? And the Writer's Bench is where all of the writers met. Well, it's the main place. There were other quote-unquote writers' benches, writers' corner, but the most famous was the Writer's Bench on 149th Street in the Grand Concourse. And this is where disputes were settled, eyes got blackened, lips got bloody, black books got taken away, style got handed out and passed down.
Oh yeah.
You see in Star Wars, oh man, you'll see in Star Wars the scene at the bench where all of those people are there. You know what I'm talking about? With the black and white, and there's like 20, 30 people fucking around. Half of those people never even came to the bench. Okay? The word got out that there was filming, and all of a sudden people you never saw before came to the bench. Let me tell you, if you come to the bench, you had to be ready because, like I said, this is the place where, it all jumped off. This is the place where the masters sat. Case 2 will be up there chilling with his one arm. You know, he's just chilling on the bench. All the masters would sit on the bench or stand up on the top. The one thing they don't show you on the film is the top. There's an overpass. So right around the corner from the bench, there's steps. It's now, if you go to the city now to look at it, it's blocked off. You can't even go up there anymore. There's an elevator, and that's where all the fights took place, out of view. And so all of the masters would hang around, and they would wait for the trains to roll by. Okay? And back in those days, you could not be a thin-skinned or sensitive person because when your piece rolled by, you know, the old gladiator, thumbs up, thumbs down. When your piece rolled by, if it was no good, yo, they would say, yo, that shit is whack.
Thumbs up.
Yeah, or thumbs down. They would say, yo, or they would say it was fresh. Right? And so that's what happened at the bench. Anything specifically you want to know about it?
Skeme? Yeah, I was thinking about there must have been other places in the system where people met up. You didn't have cellular phones or anything back then, so how did you meet?
Listen, man, I love what you just said. Let me tell you, I told CMP and Sweat the other night. So one time I was writing, that's very important what you just said, and very true. One time I was coming up to meet Teen, and I don't think I said this part, but I was coming to meet Teen, who was the vice president of a crew I was in, the TMT crew, the Magnificent Team, the Magic Touch, the Midas Touch, you know, TMT crew. And I was coming to meet my vice president, which was Teen. He was going to meet me at the bench. Respect. And I get on the train, and in between 135th Street and 149th in the Grand Concourse, 3 people get on, a Puerto Rican dude, a black dude, and a Puerto Rican female. And they all get on and they go to separate corners of the train. So I'm not thinking they're together. So I'm sitting down, there's just the 4 of us in the car. And you know back in those days, what goes down in the last car, right? That's where you roll your weed, you smoke, whatever you do, all of that takes place in the last car. And the last car on the 2 train on the Uptown opens up right at the bench. And you step off the train, the bench is right there. So I knew Teen was meeting me at the bench. And Now you go from 135th to 149th, you got to go in a tunnel because it goes under the water and crosses from Manhattan into the Bronx. When we go into the tunnel and it gets dark, the black dude gets up from his corner and he comes, stands right in front of me, like I'm sitting in the chair just like this. I got a bag with me. And he comes and stands right in front of me. He said, yo, run the bag. Run the bag. Run the bag means give me the bag. And I was like, yo, I'm not giving you shit. Then the Puerto Rican dude gets up from the other corner and he comes over. And he's like, yo, motherfucker, run the bag. And I was like, yo, you're not getting this bag. Then the female gets up. And now I realize it's a setup, they're all together. And the female comes over and lifts up her blouse and pulls out a pistol and hands it to the Puerto Rican dude who sticks it in my face. He said, yo, run the fucking bag. Okay? But the train is moving, and I know it's only a couple of minutes before we're at the bench. And what are you going to do? You really going to shoot me in between stops, right? And I knew Teen was waiting for me at the bench. So to your question, your word back then was very important. Because if I told you I was meeting you somewhere at a certain time, I had to believe and know that you would be there because there was no cell phones to say, yo, where you at? Once you leave the house, that was it. And some of you may say, well, what about the public phones? First of all, never put your mouth or face or eyes or nothing anywhere near a public New York phone. There's no telling what's on that shit. Okay? If you talk on that phone, hold that joker way over here and talk. Right? But most of them didn't work anyway, especially where we lived. In Harlem and the Bronx, most of the phones were broken. Some of us, we did it ourselves by breaking into the things and taking the change out. People would get crazy, high or drunk or whatever and snatch the phone thing, so they didn't work anyway. So your word was very important. We did not have cell phones. So to that end, I'm riding, I got a pistol in my face, the train is moving, I got my bag, they want the bag. Yo, you're not getting this bag. Okay? And I felt secure because I knew my man was going to be there when that fucking door opened. All right?
Skeme?
Yes.
Ask a question.
Give me one sec. Give me one sec.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's all right. And so I didn't give them the bag. When they saw we were approaching the station, they ran forward all the way to the front of the car. The doors open. Teen was standing right there when I came out the door. And he went to give me 5, and I dapped the 5. I said, yo, they just tried to rob me. He was like, who? I said, yo, 3 motherfuckers on the train. He said, where they at? And then when you look down, you can, because they had ran all the way to the front, you could see them come out of the train, run up the steps and out of the station. I said, yo, they gone. But the moral of that story is inside that bag was my photo album. Okay? So it wasn't about money. It was the most valuable thing in my life. Of course, besides family and my mom's and those things, but it was the most important material object in my life at that time, and you would have had to shoot me to get that bag, okay? And that photo album, CMP asked me the other night, oh, you carry that photo album everywhere you go? And yeah, that's why, because of that day. I carry that photo album everywhere I go because those are my credentials. Okay? When someone professes to be a scholar on something, to be able to speak to a point, you must first check their credentials. Because a lot of people talk shit and make up shit and embellish their story and make it seem like they did more than they did. See, because now, because of the internet, you can hear most of the stories, you can see the film clips, and after a while, you can just kind of put a story together and, make your own story up. But that photo album is my credentials. So.
Were there any magazines and such that came before Subway Art?
No.
Skeme, do you have numbers of how many trains you have done?
Yeah, my estimate is, and you're talking about pieces, I'm assuming.
Yeah, trains, yeah.
Pieces. I'm going to say about 100, I'm going to say maximum 120. No more than that.
Counting the pen pieces in the beginning, or but never mind. I actually have one question, which is
Sure.
I'm sure everybody has. It's like it's the reason why I came. It's because we all like. Maybe you were 14 when you started this. But we are all your disciples here, and we all, we don't actually know what we're doing. But the question, I'm sure we all got,
Right.
it's the shit about the cat thing. Because we heard many years after the movie that it was a fake thing, that it was just because of the...
What part was fake? What about it was fake?
The cat story.
Nah, that's
Was
not
it
fake.
planned, or...
Nah, that's not fake.
Okay.
That's real.
We heard about
Yeah.
it was all for the movie.
Nah, that's not true. Now, the one part that I did hear was semi-fake. Maybe this is the part you're talking about. The only part that I ever heard something about remotely being fake, and I hate to say this because I don't know for a fact. I really dislike repeating shit that I can't speak from firsthand knowledge or something like that. But the only thing, just to address your question, I heard was the part where Duster and Scene do the piece, and then it shows the cat throw ups over the piece. Somebody told me something like that part was kind of staged. Something had already gone over it or something like that, and then they just filmed the cap over it for the story. Because every story needs a love story, right? You need a villain, right? And you need a family story. So that's what Star Wars had. It had all of those elements. Cap was the villain. But as far as Cap doing what he did, being how he was, that was true. The untold story is that me and Cap, oh man, see, I don't really want to tell this part. I know, right? Well, but it's not that I don't want to tell it because I don't want to tell it because...
That's why we brought you here, actually.
That's the only for that one thing? Or the fuck I got to tell it then, right? You got me. But it's because some things I plan on writing a book one day before I'm dead. And so some things I wanted to talk about in the book, but I'll tell you since we're here. So, and I'm not going to tell you everything because I got to leave something for the book, but I will tell you one day me and Agent, who later became one of my partners, anybody ever seen the car Strictly Skeme Secret Agent? Big block, silver letters.
Never saw all that shit.
Yes. Agent became one of my partners. And he was just released from upstate. He was locked up for a while, and when he got back, he became one of my partners. And one day, me and Agent was at my house, and my phone rang. And I didn't have a phone in my room. My mother said, "Hey, the phone is for you." So I came in, and I sat down on the edge of my mother's bed, and I said, "Hello?" And it was a familiar voice, but I couldn't place it. And it was Terror, 161. I don't know if you know the name. But Terror called me, and he said, "Yo, man." He said, "Yo, I want you to talk to somebody." And I was like, "Who?" He said, "Yo, man, Cap want to call a truce, man." And I was like, "What?" Because at that time we was warring, and Cap and he said, "Yeah, Cap wants to call a truce." He said, he wants to meet in the Bronx. So I said, hold on, what? So I go in the room and I tell Agent, I said, "Yo, man, you know who's on the phone?" I said, it's Terror and Cap, and I think my man Payne was there as well. And he said, "Yeah, what they want?" I said, "Yo, they want to call a truce." He was like, "Bullshit, right?" And so I went back in there and got on the phone. And I asked him because Agent was the president of another crew I was in, which was TNT. And I said, "Well, yo, what you want to do?" And he said, "Yo, let's go meet him." So I was like, "Okay." So I went back and I got on the phone. I said, "Where we meeting at?" And so he named a location up, way up in the Bronx. And we got a couple little pointy objects, I'll say. And we got on the train and we traveled all the way up to the Bronx. And we stepped off into the layup, what we call stickouts. meaning that the train stuck out the end of the layup, and we jumped down in the tracks, and they kind of, it was like a movie. It was like, you know, Warriors type shit. You know, a bunch of them stepped out, and it was Cat, Terror, all of these guys, and it was just me and Agent. And we was like, what's up? And they was like, yo, listen. And Cat was like, yo, I don't have a beef with you. He said, yo, I just been going over shit in general. He said, but yo, I talked to Terror. Terror said y'all cool dudes and so on and so forth. And yo, I want to call a truce with y'all. Right? So this is not in the movie. Okay? So what I'm telling you about is after the filming that you see in the movie. But all of that was real. It was not staged. It was not fake.
We know.
Yes.
Yeah. But the last time you entered the yard, did you know it was going to be your last time?
Yes. Jesus, man, where you get these questions from? The last piece I did the night before I left for the Army. After we filmed Style Wars, my mother called me in the room. She said, listen, and at this time I was totally truant. I was totally kicked out of school. I mean, I was out of school. And my mother said, listen, that's enough of this shit. I can't, you got to go. She said, you got to get out of here. You got to do something with your life. Also I had just gotten arrested. Arrested, me and Agent, again. We got arrested, me, Mr. Mean, and Agent was stealing clothes in Hoboken, New Jersey. And we were successful all day. Listen, we had bags, right, of shit. And the way it works is 2 people go in the store and the third person stays outside and guards the bags. And we rotate that. Now it's your turn, And so this time it was Mr. Mean's turn to stay out with the bags, and me and Agent. And like most dumb criminals, what we decided to do, right? Let's hit one more store. We have been successful all day. We said, yo, let's hit one more store, the last one, right? And we agreed. By now it's dark. So me and Agent go in the store. We're stealing, I know y'all don't know this shitty stuff, but because the shit'll kill you. Accent, seasoning, mayonnaise, razors. Yeah, these are things that you could take and sell back in the neighborhood. This is why we stole them. It's called money racking. Yeah, I didn't have a fetish for mayonnaise and shit, okay? It was to sell. So we had all of these things, and the way you do it is you tuck your shirt down into your pants, you pull your belt so tight you can't even breathe, and then you take the items, you stick it in your shirt like that, and then you push it to your back with your elbow. And the back of my shirt was filled with accents, spam, all kind of shit. And I happened to look up, and I see the two-way mirror slide like that. I just caught it. And I went to Agent. I said, yo, we spotted. Dump the shit. And so we're going up and down the aisles. You back up to one of the aisles. You pull your shirt out, and you let all the stuff fall out. And so we dumped all the stuff, ran to the front of the store. I hit the door, didn't budge. They locked the doors already. And the manager said, yo, there's no need. He said, the cops is on the way. And so me and Agent is like, oh, man. Agent found another door and got away. Okay? Because we were running around the store trying to find ways to get out. He found it and he got out. I didn't find the door. The cops came and arrested me. And as I'm sitting here today, I'm telling you that Agent who got away came back and told the cops, yo, I'm with him. I'm telling you the truth.
Skeme?
Yeah.
Why are you
And
today?
then he moved here to Næstved, Agent. Oh, it's just there's an old guy riding from Næstved called Agent.
Oh, y'all got an agent too.
We got an agent too.
Cool.
Right here.
Well, let me tell you about Agent, man. That's a friend that gets away and comes back and says, yo, I'm with this guy. Take me too. Okay? And so we both got arrested. We got locked up in Sea Caucus boys' home. Not a nice place. A young man was raped. This is youth. This is 17 and under. While we were there, a young man was raped. They put him in segregation. and the next morning he was found hung dead in the cell, as the song goes in the message. Right? And so I remember calling my mother. You know, you get that phone call, and I say, "Hey, Mom, locked up in click. Hello? Hello?" Right? And so my mother finally got the word. I got the word to her that I was locked up when my court appearance and all of that was. And let me tell you, New Jersey is decently far away from New York, so much that to pay a taxi would have cost a lot of money. You know, we don't have cars. The majority of people in New York at this time didn't have cars. Or, you know, real native New Yorkers, they take the subway and shit and the bus. You don't have a car. And so my mother would have had to pay a taxi, would have had to cost phenomenal. But the way she got around it was she rented a limousine, which actually turned out, you know, to be cheaper than a car. So imagine I'm here locked up and I'm looking out the gates, and you know, we're all looking out the bar window, and my mother pulls up in a fucking limousine. I'm telling you the truth. She pulls up in a limousine, and I'm like, oh, and they're like, oh shit, it's Mom's, this is a limo. You know? But it wasn't that we were rich, of course. It was cheaper to take the limo than the taxi for her to come to court way out in Jersey. And so anyway, I went before the judge. The judge made me promise to not come back in the state before I turned 21 years old. So basically, I couldn't come back into New Jersey before I turned 21. Did I listen? Hell no. Right? So I got released. But anyway, these are the things that was, you know, these were the final straws for my mother. She was like, yo, that's it. That's enough. Listen, remember I told you I had dropped out of school. So when you're in school, you'll get a bus pass, you know, to ride the public transportation with the pass. But because I was not in school, of course, I'm not getting the pass. But my mother doesn't know I'm not in school. Why? Because every morning I got up like clockwork, without fail, dressed, grab a book bag, looked like I was going to school. Okay? This one particular morning, I don't remember if she was running late or I was running late. Anyway, somehow this time we wound up at the train station at the same time. And so my mother goes down, I'm right behind her, we're talking. But see, I'm so used to hopping the turnstile, you know what I'm talking about, right? Where you don't pay your fare. I'm so used to doing it that I forgot that I didn't have a bus pass or train pass. So my mother goes through, and there's everyone from the building getting ready to go to work. All of the neighbors, right? And so my mother goes through, she pays, and then I'm like, oh shit, I don't have a pass. And so she's in front of me, and I do it super slick. I pull it. She didn't even, none the wiser. I pull it. I slide right in through the thing. I slide right in without paying. And as soon as I step through, a detective grabs my arm. I mean, he was standing right there. I mean, if you would have looked at this guy, you would have thought he was a young kid, but he was a detective or undercover. And he grabbed the arm of my shirt. But listen, man, instinct said, yo, you cannot get arrested in front of your mother, period. So I immediately snatched out of his arm. I ran on the tracks, jumped on the tracks, ran across the tracks. And you got to remember, all the people from my building is like, what the fuck are you doing? And so, of course, my mother was embarrassed. You understand? You know, my mother's standing there with all of the ladies, you know, the church ladies from the building. And your son just jumped on the tracks and ran across the tracks. And my mother yells me, what are you doing? I said, Mom, I forgot a book. And of course, there was no books in my bag unless it was a black book with graffiti in it. It was the only books I had. But after that, it was shortly. One day I came home and my mother was sitting on the edge of the bed and she was crying. She was crying. And to see your mother cry, you know, that's worse than any torture. And I said, Mom, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? I didn't know what it was. And she was just crying, and she handed me a paper. And I looked at it, and a lump the size of this soda just came in my throat. And it said, yes, ma'am, we want to inform you that your son hasn't been in school in 100 and something days. Yeah, for real. And we're hereby formally letting you know your son is truant. And, yo, my mother could not believe that all of this time I kept from her that I was not in school. And so these are the things that my mother couldn't take anymore. And so she said, yo, that's enough. You got to go. You're going to the recruiter, to the Army recruiter. And I went down to the Army recruiter. She wanted me to sign up for the National Guard, which is, you know, a small thing, some weekend duties and things at the time. But they offered me $5,000, and I signed up for the regular Army and did all my paperwork. But I lied on my paperwork about some charges that I had, and so my contract became null and void, and I didn't get any money, right? Had to write me a new contract because I lied. I falsified my contract, and I didn't get any bonus money, and they altered my contract and so on and so forth, and I wound up going in the regular Army, and so that's how I left. One thing a lot of people don't understand is that my mother worked for the city of New York. She worked for the Department of Welfare for 30-something years. She retired as an office manager, but at that time she was still working. But you know, when you're a kid, you don't understand these things, and really by vandalizing and then making a film about it, I was putting my mother's job in jeopardy, because the city could have easily said, hey, your son is making, listen, I told you $1 million worth of damage. By this time, you're talking trillions of dollars worth of damage I had done. And not only are we firing you, but we're going to take the money out of your check to pay for this shit that your son is doing. So my mother was like, yo, that's it, and I left. I didn't see Star Wars. I went to the Army in 1982. Star Wars came out in 1983. And I was in Korea, I think. And someone sent me Star Wars in the mail. Was the first time I saw it. And I was blown away. I couldn't believe that, you know, we made it this far. You know, it was official that we were properly represented, and you know, that it would be chronicled for all time. I had to make a decision. Remember, I told you anonymity was key. So I knew once I filmed and my face was on camera that for me it was over, really, because you know, once they know who you are and they know where you live and all of that, it's crazy. You know, in the movie, my mother says he's the king of the yakety yak yard, right? But a lot of people think she said yakety yak yard because she didn't know the yard or what it was about it, but the exact opposite is true. She intentionally said yakety yak, not to name the 3 yard, because it was right outside the door, and she didn't want to give away our location, you know, right? So yeah. Anything else? Yes. I'm sorry. I get you. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the Vandal Squad at that time?
Wow. Somebody just asked me that yesterday. I had absolutely no interaction, problems with, contact with, never saw, was never approached. I said maybe I didn't bomb enough. Maybe I wasn't important enough. But I had 0 contact with the Vandal Squad. Now, of course, I heard many stories about them jacking people up, spray painting their face, spray painting their hair, slapping them up, all of that. I was just reading Fuzz One's, one of Fuzz One's books the other day, and he talks about, you know, getting japped up by the cops and, you know, painted and all of that. So those things went on. Those things went on. But as far as me, personal experience with the Vandal Squad, I had none. I never got busted for writing. I've been raided, I've been chased many times, but you couldn't catch me, man. I was in Olympic physical condition. Now I can't fucking walk from the hotel to here. This dude is speed walking. My Pumas is about to make a hole in the bottom. But back then you couldn't catch me if you wanted to. Vandal Squad, nobody. I remember one time we got raided. We came up out the tunnel, like the same way you were talking about in those tunnels with the trap door. So we came out and the cops were surrounding. Like they knew they was just going to grab all of these people. They were surrounding. But yo, we were so quick and so agile, like, yo, we literally just slipped right through their hands, and they're standing there in a circle waiting to corral you. But we were so, like, you know what I mean? Like, we went this way, they went that way. When they went that way, we went back this way, but they couldn't come back. And you're gone. Yeah. Anything you want to know specifically about it?
No, I'm just curious in terms of you guys showing your faces this early in time already, because many of you did that on film, of course.
Right.
And when everything came to Europe, you know, it became a big question for us, of course. What we could write on the names and stuff like that. We I was just curious about that. Your thoughts on
Yeah. Good question, and you're right. But that's exactly it. I mean, once my face was shown, I knew it was up for me. So I had to make a decision. Do I want to be in a potentially? And look, all this shit sounds educated now because it's afterthought. At 17, 16, I wasn't thinking about this. It was just, you want to ask me some questions? I'm going to answer the questions. I wasn't philosophizing like we're doing now, talking shit. It was just Henry said, I want to film you. I'm going to ask you some questions. I want to ask you some questions. Nobody knew at that time what Star Wars was going to be. I didn't have a crystal ball to know that it was going to blow up around the world and be a global cultural experience. I didn't know that. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh yeah, I knew it was going to be all this. I had no idea. None. But back in those days, the cops played fair. You know what I mean by that? What I mean by that is now they use a lot more. First of all, the first thing is, back in those days, the hickey and ski days, I know those are probably some of the most famous Vandal Squad guys' names you've heard. In those days, they played fair. And what I mean by that is they did stakeouts. They walked the tunnels. You know what I mean? They got dirty. Now it's more, if you get caught, they threaten the shit out of you, ruin your life, get you to turn on other people and become an informant. There's cameras, surveillance cameras, motion detectors, you know all the new technologies. I don't know. Are they playing fair? I don't know. And last but not least, the penalties are much more severe now. They're felonies. The fines the monetary fines can just ruin you. Tens of thousands of dollars. The average inner city kid doesn't have $10,000 to pay a fine. So you sit in Rikers Island until, you can pay restitution. And for painting, does that make sense? To send someone to jail for painting? I don't think so.
When?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
When did it come to your awareness, the effect that you guys made on the world in terms of what you did?
It wouldn't have, for me, it would have been 30-something years later when I came back around the way.
And what were your first thoughts?
Well, first of all, I couldn't believe that these old dudes were still painting. I was like, yo, y'all still painting? That's crazy. And you got to remember, Chain 3 is, I'm 53, so Chain 3 is, I don't know, 5 years older than me, something like that. So he's maybe 58, I think, Sweat, about right?
Yeah.
So, Chain 3 is almost 60 years old and he's still painting, right? And he's still proficient, he's still nasty. That's the thing. It's not only that he's still painting, it's that he's still good at it. And so when I came home and I saw him still painting, I was in shock. I was like, yo, you still painting? He was like, yeah. And so I began to see more global influence. I remember one time I was living in Italy and I turned on the TV and it was Crazy Legs was breakdancing somewhere in Italy. I was like, oh shit. I couldn't believe it. So yeah, I was shocked that it had really went around the world. I was shocked.
Well, look,
Yes.
You mentioned the
Oh,
classic.
give me one sec, because I promised my man right here that I was going to get him next. I apologize.
I catch back to that point.
Yes, hold that, because I don't want to, I told him I was coming. Go ahead, bro.
I just want to know if you at any time teamed up with Michael Davis from the TNT crew.
Michael Davis? You're a funny guy, man. Now, for you to say Michael Davis, that means you know him personally. Okay?
Yeah.
We'll talk after this. Okay?
Can I just catch back?
Yes.
Because you also, for me, a lot of quotes from Star Wars are they became quotes, they became classics. They're echoing in my brain. And I think, quite sure, you said I didn't start writing to go to Paris.
Right.
So, and you came back after so many years, and you see people actually went to Paris, and so you cannot have been that surprised that people were still writing in some sense as well. And I don't, there's not an accusation, but it's just like curiosity, you had like some provision.
But provision
Provision,
in what regard?
Now, well, as that you knew the scene would like perhaps continue, that people were maybe even starting to write to become famous.
Yeah, but even so, Paris is not global. Paris is one location. I'm speaking, and you're right, but I'm speaking as a global phenomenon where, you know, they're writing in Africa, they're writing in Spain, they're writing in Greece, they're writing in, I'm talking even on a more larger scale, I'm really talking global. They're writing, yes, they're writing in Korea, they're writing in China. Global. Yes, at that time, some people had made pilgrimages to Paris and started in the early gallery scene. Yes, I did know that, but
yeah, as there was already a division in that time of like people taking it, staying underground, and people like jumping out and wanting to be profound upper ground or artists.
right. Yeah, no, I don't knock that. You know, I was speaking from my place at that time, and I meant that. It doesn't mean that eventually I wouldn't mind selling a canvas or two in Paris, but my mindset was not to write to go to Paris or to go to a gallery. Yes?
Skeme,
Okay.
I just want to say, in my life, you are a true legend. You are one of the reasons why I'm doing this video, doing all these things.
Wow.
It somehow saved my life, you know, in a bad neighborhood, and that's
He's
how
the guy doing crime in the city in Denmark. By the way.
Hold up. Are you? Is that the one you sent me the card?
Yeah.
Oh, Crime in the City card?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just want to say, yeah.
Yeah, man, you're most welcome. Thank you, bro. Yeah,
I have one
please.
last question.
Yes.
if I may.
Yeah.
The ski goggles.
Yes.
I'm not sure about the snow and the skiing in the Bronx.
Yeah.
I was looking for it, but I
Right.
didn't find it. Why?
The snow or the goggles? Let me tell you, bro, I don't know what happened to those goggles. I wish I still had them.
But why were you wearing them?
It was just part of fashion. Yeah. Well, you know, all of those, the fashion and the terminology, the language, the slang is all tied. So if you ever heard of the rappers, you probably know, Cool Rock Ski and Joe Ski. You know those suffixes on the end of names, right? Ski, you know what that means. Everybody know what that means, right? Skiing? Yes.
I just want to add a question.
Well, let me tell you this. See, skiing, that when they say, yo, let's go skiing, that means to sniff cocaine. Okay? White powder. Okay, so you got to understand, where we're also embroiled in the drug culture as well. And so when you hear those people, Cool Rock Ski, whatever ski, is because they're saying, I have an affiliation to using cocaine, right? Or I'm making myself unto one of those hustlers that was dealing with cocaine. And so hence the term skiing, and so we started to steal ski goggles. And that's why we had the goggles.
Anders?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
Something I've been thinking a lot about after many years being interested in the whole history of graffiti, and also the way that all here are seeing this book, like Subway Art and the Star Wars film, as a document and a truth in a way that have set the whole culture over in Europe and all around the world. Then I just can't start wondering if we got the right picture. I mean, it's only two persons, or it's a lot of persons in the film that have made this whole like production, and also they also needed drama and all that stuff. But
right.
Is it a valid document of a time that you could call your youth in a way? I mean, you are the one who knows because you were actually there. You were there before the film, and you were there many years after the film, and also after the camera was turned off.
Right.
I mean, is it a real? I mean, because we are all living in a way after the movie, and we are romanticizing it. And
right. So you want me to tell you if you're living a lie or not? Right?
I actually want that because I think it gives sense, and then I actually think it's also good that all the guys like you, they really need to tell the story. So it's fantastic that you're here. so we actually can give all these questions and record it. Because when you're gone,
Right.
and when all these first generations are gone, and if you have not told your story, and if we have not been writing more books
That's
about
right.
what actually happened,
That's right.
then it's gone forever.
Yeah, speak
And
on it. Speak
no
on it.
offense, but you are starting to get in an age where you can lose the story.
Yeah,
and that's
yeah.
so
Thank you.
horrifying. So, but yeah.
Listen,
you get
man.
the right picture.
One thing my elders told me, and by my elders I mean T-Kid. Before I came over here, you know, I spoke with T-Kid and I spoke with Shane. And T-Kid said to me, and I quote, "Yo, man, they don't like when you air dirty laundry over there, man. So don't air out the dirty laundry." Right? But he's right. So to that end, I don't want to be a person who comes to another place and airs our dirty laundry, so to speak. I am a professor of the truth. But I tell you, I referenced the other day, there's a book by Jack Stewart, Graffiti Kings. And in the book, two people call Riff 170 a biter. I believe the two people, a biter. Meaning that he copied things from other people. Credible sources, one is Tracy 168, and the other one is, I believe, is Bama/Amarillo. And so when I was reading this book, and I see it in print, see, print is very, to your point, print is very permanent, as is shit on the internet. Once it's written, that shit becomes the truth. Okay? And so they wrote in this book, Riff was a biter. Now, I wasn't there. I don't know if it is true or not that he bit A, B, or C. I know for a fact because Riff has told me himself, yeah, he did copy a worm, you know, the funky worm that Amarillo did in a book, but then Riff painted it. He was the first to paint it on the train. And in our culture, the first one to put the shit on the train is the real motherfucker, okay? But, hold on. But my problem with the book is if you're going to write in a book that Riff 170 is a biter, then at the very minimum I should turn the page and it should be now where I'm asking Riff, hey, they said you're a biter. What do you have to say about that?
Are you a biter?
Okay? Of course not.
Of course not.
Right? But I have influences, as we all do, but I'm not a biter.
Indeed.
Okay? So my problem with that is that they asked Riff, or they put Riff in a negative light. Someone who's super important in the culture, he was put in a negative light in print for the rest of time that shit is going to exist. Riff was a biter. But on the next page, it should be an interview with Riff asking him, yo, what do you think about this? And he should have had the opportunity to respond. So the reason I'm saying that is, so I respect your question about that, but I try not to talk about people because, now listen, if they were here next to me, sure, I would have no problem. Because I don't want people to say, yo, you went to another country and talk shit about me behind my back when I wasn't there. Okay? But your question is a very scholarly question. And the answer to your question is, first of all, you're not living a lie. But as I told you, the scene at the bench when all of those people was there, what did I tell you? Half of those people never even came to the bench. Okay, they heard there was filming. Okay? This is a place where you had to have a little knuckle game, not a big one, but you had to be ready to put your hands up, win, lose, or draw. Right? Okay, hold on. Okay? So, the same thing with the book, with Subway Art. Obviously, if they took a picture of it, what you got to understand is at that time when these movies and the books were made, these are the people who were up at that time, whose shit was running at that time. It doesn't mean they were the end all be all. I'm a prime example of being in the right place at the right time, so to speak. Okay? I wasn't the most up. I wasn't the only up. I wasn't the only style guy. There was many. I was just in the right place at the right time.
Right.
Okay?
That's the right time.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
And to that end, there were many people who should have been represented in the film, but were not. You got to understand, Henry had to make a decision, because let me tell you, if you reach back in the past and you pick one guy and you don't get all 100 of those guys, they're going to be like, oh, how you get him, but you didn't get him. You didn't ask me. I'm not in the film. Okay? So people threatened his life. Henry went out and had to take a karate class because people threatened to beat him up because they weren't in the film. Yeah, he had to go take, I'm telling you. You're talking about, yeah, that's right. You're talking about 50-something years old at the time. He's going to take a karate class because he's getting death threats. Okay? So I will say this to you. First of all, we have a saying, man, the pictures don't lie. Right? So if you have a person who you're only able to find 5 pictures of their pieces, I'm going to be nice and say double it. That means they had 10. And that's it. And they have nothing to say. 10 pieces doesn't give you a voice in my book. Okay? Doesn't give you a voice. So there were many people. There's a famous picture of me in the yard with Lady Pink. You know the picture with she's painting? And it's a Martha Cooper shot. Okay? Yo, me and Agent took Lady Pink and Martha Cooper to the yard so that they could take those photos. Yeah, that was our yard, the 3 yard. We took them there so that they could take those photos of her painting. You want to call it staged? I don't know. I wouldn't go that far to say it was staged because it was a real yard. It was still illegal. It was still dangerous. But we took them there to...
I call it respect.
Respect. We took them there to get those shots. Right? Years later, I come back to find that Lady Pink wrote in a book that I was high and I looked like I was going to rob her. What the fuck are you talking about? I was there. So people sensationalize for their own personal reasons. Listen, man, if we wanted to rob them, they would have got robbed. It wouldn't have been, there's no, we looked like we wanted to rob you. We was going to rob you. You would have been robbed. What are you talking about? Nothing could be farther from the truth. We took them there out of friendship, as a favor to Henry and Martha to take them there so she could get the shots. That's not Lady Pink's yard. Lady Pink never stepped foot in the 3 yard maybe before or after that photo. Okay? There's a saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words, but sometimes the words are not accurate. So the one picture shows Lady Pink painting, and it shows me standing on the thing looking at her painting, and it looks like, I'm like, wow, look at this woman, female, girl writer. She's fucking fantastic. But that's not what I'm thinking. What I'm thinking is, yo, that pea is from a peanut piece. That's what I'm thinking. Right? So there's truths, and then there's in-betweens, the lines and all of that. That's right. And that's why this is very important. But you're not living a lie. You're not living a lie. You know, Cap was real. What you saw was real. All the shit we talked about and did was real. It was real. It was real. Yes.
Do you think anybody was overlooked in that era?
Oh yeah, many people, man.
That should have been in the movie?
Yeah, many people. Many. Oh man, I tell you what, you name some names and I'll say yes or no.
Like Skeme.
Well, he was in the movie. testing me, man. Now you naming Michael Davis, and now you going Black Scene, man. Who is this guy, man? For those of you that don't know, Michael Davis is actually Cess 157, the guy who's sitting with me on the top of the key food thing where at the beginning where he says, yo, man, what you do last night? That's Michael Davis. But we got to talk after this, man. But Scene was in the movie. He was in the movie.
I think we could listen to you like for the rest of this weekend.
Yeah,
and then
I couldn't talk that long.
Still be anxious to get the book, see all the photos. So yeah, let's put our hands together.
Time to have fun.
In half an hour or so, I guess we're ready in the alleyway out here.
Yeah, let's do it.
So see you all out there.
Busse, Francois.
How you know them, man? Oh, no shit. That's a small world. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, anytime when you say,
Det var godt.